Alright, what's up guys, Single Player Nacho here. If Resident Evil had a middle name, it would be Gruesome. Resident Gruesome Evil. Thanks to its reputation of setting up off-putting, mysterious murder scenes. You gotta pay close attention to the tiny details intentionally left behind during these scenes. Most of the time you'll find a corpse laying around, with a note attached to said corpse that gives a tiny explanation of what happened here. Some of these are pretty mysterious, and others are left unsolved. So to crack the code, let's take a closer look at these scenes. Without further ado, let's get to it. First we have Resident Evil Code Veronica, Infirmary. You might be impressed what you'll stumble upon during this otherwise underrated gem of a game. You play it now and it's somewhat cheesy, it's got PS2 graphics, but then you head into the infirmary, and something is clearly off here. This crime scene includes a zombie on a surgical table, with various creepy tools and syringes laid next to it. Meh, it's just another day in Resident Evil world. But then you click on that zombie, and the text reads, it appears that he has been anatomized. Something scarier than a zombie is opening this corpse up. Outside of the crime scene, there's just this palpable, creepy audio playing the entire time. Head into the infirmary office and you'll find a journal that explains most of what's going on. This journal belongs to the anatomist, and the anatomist says, there is a demon in my mind. I can't control the fierce impulses that the demon sometimes drives me to act upon. It is a brutal ceremony. With the demon next to me, I enjoy watching people agonize in pain, screaming and convulsing repeatedly as they die. This is one sick puppy, no doubt. Next to the anatomist's desk is a full-scale model of the human body. It's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Why would you keep this around? But that's certainly not the worst part about this crime scene. As you head to the next room, you find an even more brutal scene. A furnace room filled with corpses, blood, and more zombies, undoubtedly belonging to the anatomist. You know, this is an older game, so it's kind of hard to get creeped out, but still, the amount of violence that was conducted in this room, and the fact that there's torture tools laid all over the place, spooky. Head back to the main infirmary and you'll find that a body bag that was formerly filled with one corpse is now empty, and the sounds of biting and chewing. Take a couple of steps and you have found the anatomist, who's all zombied up eating another zombie. So it's like double cannibalism. And this anatomist is not only horrifying, he's somewhat of a sub-boss. It's kind of hard to take down. Regardless, I really do wonder what happened exactly in this infirmary. There's a dark and twisted tale, no doubt. Next up, Resident Evil 7 Ship Deaths. There's a lot going on around Dulvey, Louisiana, a lot of bad stuff in particular. Just so happens that you are the protagonist in this moldy story. During the third act of the game, you come across a gigantic ship filled with corpses. This is every YouTuber's dream, or a perfect candidate for a found footage horror film. The ship is disheveled, the corridors are completely blackened, an evil substance fills every single room in this place. And that's when we find the biggest crime scene found in the ship. Besides the other smaller corpses, there is what I can only describe as a corpse mural or structure or sculpture. Various poor souls fell to their untimely death to the evil substance known as the mold. There's at least 6 bodies here, and the mystery is, of course, how the hell did this happen? Who were these people? Did they know that there was such a dangerous presence with them in an otherwise innocent shipment cruise? I don't know. Take a closer look at these bodies and you can see their final facial expressions before their entire souls were filled with mold. There are some clues left behind through hallucinations that are experienced by the player. Some quick flashbacks of the event before the cargo members were killed viciously. You can see them hurrying up, trying to find an escape route or to hide. Of course, you can only hide so much from this ominous presence. Eventually, you will come across those cargo members and how their story ended. Disgustingly enough, their corpses are pretty well preserved. It's been some time since this ship has been abandoned, and still you can see the effects of not only how dangerous the mold is to the human body, but to the human mind. This guy went insane before he died. Various scribbles on the wall is the perfect evidence of that. Next we have Resident Evil 4, The Dead Woman. You just gotta love remote, crazy Spanish villages, and with them their crazy inhabitants, the Ganados. And they are quite crazy, violent, and they worship Los Iluminados, specifically the Plaga, the parasite that has complete control of their minds. But there is one cabin in particular during the first part of the game. The outer wall is suspiciously protruding blood. Not that blood is a strange sight to see in these games, but there is something fucked up with this wall. You head inside the cabin and we find the crime scene. An unidentified woman pierced, impaled by a farm tool through her mouth and on to the wall. She really pissed someone off. I don't know who, but god damn it, this is a very aggressive way to kill someone. But we have to take a look at the evidence, the fact that it is a farming tool. There's no doubt in my mind that another villager killed this villager. It was a war amongst Ganados. Now, why would Ganados want to kill each other? Well, it's that devotion to the Plaga. Within them, they have that parasite, and they worship it like a god. But a theory describes that some of the Ganados were not that strong with the Plaga and wanted to abandon the village completely and escape. Perhaps that explains what happened with this woman. And I don't fully understand the devotion to begin with. In fact, the Plaga actually killed every single child in the village before you arrive there. And maybe this was one of those mothers that lost her child. Still, a very gruesome scene, filled with mystery. Next up, Resident Evil Revelations, the Genesis Scanner. A harsh rainstorm is a perfect start to what you are about to find on the Queen Zenobia. And yes, it's another ship filled with mysterious deaths. Like, how many more can we possibly have? Jesus. You arrive at the ship deck with I can't keep my eyes off her Jill Valentine, and the very first room, there's just meat on the floor. Like human meat. And we come across our very first unfortunate shipgoer, a man that has been completely destroyed. Half of his skull is visible. I just hope it was a quick death. As you venture through the Queen Zenobia, you'll find more and more victims. One is even hanging from a ventilation system. This guy was definitely trying to hide from a BOW. Of course, none of these two corpses match what we find on a metal table, the corpse of a man that's been completely destroyed. His entrails spew out of his decaying corpse. This is a pretty violent scene. Worst yet is what is found underneath a grate on the floor. This ooey gooey human arm that's filled with slime and just about every human fluid imaginable. That sounds really gross, but just look at the disgust on Jill's face. That about says what that smells like. Interestingly enough, this separated limb is hanging onto a pistol, and when you look back at the corpse next to it, it seems to be missing its hand or it's hidden. That's when you break out the Genesis Scanner, a device that analyzes living and, or in this case, dead things. You analyze that corpse and it's hiding handgun bullets. Something tells me that this guy took his own life before being cornered and eaten by one of the many disgusting BOWs on board the Queen Zenobia. All in all, it's just the state of how these bodies are and the murder scenes. Very gruesome stuff. Next up, we have Resident Evil 5 Cave Corpses. The surrounding areas in Resident Evil 5 are in complete disarray, and that's why you need Buffy, Chris Boulderstein Redfield to save the day. Unfortunately for Redfield, he's seen a lot of crazy things, but not to this degree. The civilization in this place, along with the fact that a life-taking plague that slowly eats away at your brains and wants you to consume brains at the same time, is taking hold. That's what leads to many of the ghastly sights you encounter in the first few areas. It's your typical Resident Evil game. The atmosphere is being set up with some horrific sights like this dead, decapitated, I think it's a dog, I'm not sure, it's definitely an animal. Very sadistic. But the mystery here lies in these two corpses hanging in a cave. Now this just may be typical Majini behavior. These two dudes just pissed someone off. They were killed and left here to die. But look at the state of these corpses. They don't really look like any of the other character models used throughout the game. They seem extremely worn out, like they've been here for quite a while, but it looks like their life force has been sucked dry. Might these two be energy reservoirs for the cannibalistic nature of the Majini? I'm not sure. Above these two corpses, you'll find a well. So I'm guessing they were tossed in there and left to die. More than likely as part of a sacred cult ritual. Then again, we may never know. Next up we have Resident Evil 4, Plaga Bed Victim. There are honestly too many corpses to count within Resident Evil 4, but this one is particularly mysterious. You can find this body as you head towards the operation room. Now, operation rooms and Resident Evil, they just don't mix well. You're gonna get some very creepy, scary stuff. This one just so happens to be a regenerator who's cooking up. Next to the regenerator room is where you'll find easily one of the most ghastly sights in the game. One of those pale, bald cultists in what appears to be the aftermath of a failed Plaga experiment. This death scene is unsolved for many reasons. For one, we don't actually know how Plaga implementation happens. I'm talking about the actual method of how a Plaga is inserted into a body. We've seen glimpses through Leon's infection and Ashley's infection, but what the hell is going on here? It looks like this dude's spine was opened up, and who knows if that Plaga was going in or going out. Or if this guy's body just wouldn't accept the Plaga. No clue. And there are tiny details in this room, or the entire operation setting here, that gives us clues. For one, the walls are drenched in blood, from the ceiling down to the floor. Whatever happened here was a burst of death. But if you take a closer look at those pipes, or tubes, I don't know what you call them, they're just disgusting inventions of a sick mind. Those tubes actually lead to these giant vats that have the biohazard sign on them, that classic logo. And I'm just assuming that those vats contain regenerator supplements. So disgusting. Still, I really hope we find out in Resident Evil 4's remake what really went down in this room. Let's just hope it was consensual. Next up, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Ivy Victims. Ivies are these ungodly creatures that bend and twist with their viney bodies, faces of agricultural hell, and little orange pimples that you gotta pop in order to kill. But these plants from hell definitely have their share of victims. Of course, we have to remember they are bioweapons, developed by some of the smartest minds on the face of the earth. But sometimes those creations bite back. And that's what you'll find in the underground lab in Resident Evil 2's remake. Something extremely disastrous happened to these scientists and lab workers. The first of the Ivy victims is a man in a hazmat suit that has been crashed onto what is supposed to be an unbreakable barrier glass. And conveniently, he's holding on to the key item that you need to progress in the game. But take a look at his face and the purplish aura within his helmet. I can obviously see the physical pain this man was under. It looks like a branch just grabbed him and flung his body across the room. But something tells me this guy was gassed to death. I mean, those eyes do not lie. He's got raccoon spots for eyes. His skin is completely purple or blue, just pretty much not human. And that's where the mystery really begins. How did these guys really die? And did they know the dangers of what they were working with? Did they even have a hunch that something this deadly would happen to them? Probably the most mysterious part about this entire setting is a perfectly preserved scientist laying on the floor. Very strange contrasts in terms of corpses here. It's a very weird thing to say, but nonetheless very mysterious. Next up we have Resident Evil 0 Bunk Bed Corpses. Now most of these death scenes you can kind of see what happened. There's a manner of intent about how these people died, but I have no clue about this scene. Found in the later stages of Resident Evil 0, you'll come across the first corpse, and it's on a bunk bed. The interesting thing here is the level of decay that's happened. More interesting is where this thing is found. It's on a bed, but there doesn't seem to be foul play. It seems as though this guy died in his sleep. Then again, there are various bloodstains laid around the room. So a number of things could have happened here. This guy could have been coughing up blood and he eventually passed due to the enormously toxic things going around in James Marcus's laboratory and training school. Then the next question is, who could this person be? James Marcus had many students, and let me tell you, their treatment was not in goodwill. So we could very well be seeing just another victim on James Marcus's hit list. Besides the corpse, you'll also see various items in this miskept room, broken picture frames, a bottle of pills, and what appears to be a journal. Unfortunately, it's not attainable. I think we're looking at a very grisly scene of a personal conflict. But unfortunately, guys, we'll just never know. Make sure to comment down below your theories as to what you believe happened to this poor individual. Next up, we have Resident Evil 7, the D-Series woman. Now this next one will most definitely give you the spooks. Probably the scariest of the bunch, because it takes place in Marguerite Baker's area of Resident Evil 7, and it's just not pleasant at all. In fact, the lead up to this corpse is chock-filled with supernatural appearances, sounds, creepy child drawings, the works. I guess this is when Resident Evil 7 stopped being Resident Evil for certain fans, because we're looking at ghost haunting type scares here. And there are plenty, but it makes total sense because at the end of this ghost trip, there's something very disgusting hiding in a little secret hole in the wall of this bedroom. A grossly rotting woman or girl, we just cannot specify a certain age here, sitting on a chair, and it's definitely dead. The death scene also features various voodoo dolls. I mean, they're everywhere. And a plate of fruits? At least they kept her fed, I guess. I would hope so. So that leads us to how this person died. They were obviously being fed something, but look at the position of that arm. It's reaching towards the opening. Whoever and whatever this person was definitely locked behind this hole in the wall. Was she forgotten? Who knows? This is undoubtedly the work of Evelyn Baker, E001, a sadistic little girl who wants to build a family. Sadly, she is a BOW and that's just not gonna happen. But she is a very interesting villain in that she is a BOW that has this shattered personality who yearns for love. And believe it or not, this girl's corpse had a name. She was known as Dahlia, a D-Series clone of Evelyn or Ava, which leads into Resident Evil Village, but that's a whole other story. And Dahlia only lived to be 319 days old. Eventually, the mold in her body just couldn't hold up. Unlike Evelyn, who substitutes for being an old woman every now and then, Dahlia was, I suppose, kept alive until she just couldn't do it anymore. That D-Series blood in her veins are just too valuable. That's why you gotta pull that arm off and use it to create that cure. And the sounds that arm makes. I mean, poor Ethan Winters. But I have so many questions about this Dahlia. What was she like? Was she anything like Evelyn? Was she evil? Was she good? Who knows? We will never know. And last but not least, Resident Evil 2, Brian Irons Victim. Now I'm sure you've all seen this girl on the table and have constantly wondered who she is and why she's so blue. This is Catherine Warren, the daughter of the mayor of the now defunct Raccoon City. She was famous for her looks of beauty, and it caught the attention of Brian Irons, who is a maniacal serial killer who has a fetish for white blondes, and well, Catherine fits that bill pretty close. Still doesn't explain what exactly happened to Catherine and how she ended up on that table, but there are parts of the story that are uncovered. For one, her father, the mayor of Raccoon City, did not care about his daughter at all, Catherine. In fact, the mayor left Catherine to be under the protection of Brian Irons, who was long suspected of mischievous acts, countless abuse allegations, and suspicions of, well, being a serial killer. Not a good look on the mayor for leaving your daughter alone with this goddamn monster. She was left alone with Brian Irons, and somehow she was stripped of her life. But how? Judging from the various animal carcasses, Brian Irons does not like to get messy with his victims, so possibly some kind of strangulation. Then again, there are various chemicals that easily could have poisoned this poor girl, which might explain the blue hue on her skin. There's just no oxygen left in her body. Now, regardless of how she was killed, I think the outbreak really ticked off Brian Irons and he just went ham with this crazy fetish of his. Thankfully, or well, not thankfully, we interrupt what I suppose he was going to dissect this girl completely, explains the bin full of bloody rags next to disgusting Mr. Irons. There's not a lot of serial killer scenes we get to see within the Resident Evil universe. This is definitely one of the unique ones. Lots of things unexplained that might just be better off that way. Well, thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope you liked it, and I hope it didn't get you excited. There's a lot of dead bodies here. Comment down below what you think happened to these corpses, if you found any other clues and theories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more horror lore, lists, and mysteries. Thank you all so much for the support. It's very much appreciated, everyone. Have an awesome rest of your day, and as always, stay single.